In a quiet town where afternoons smelled of cut grass and warm bread, a 12-year-old boy came home with a math book pressed flat against his chest. He dropped onto the couch, staring at a page that would not soften no matter how long he looked. His name was David, a 6th grader whose legs were always a little dusty from the public field because soccer felt like wind and wings to him. What did not feel like wind was the number circled in red at the top of his test. It wasn't only the grade that stung, what ached was how easily his neighbor Matt seemed to solve what tangled David up. When his father stepped in from the backyard, he noticed the stillness, the tight line of his son's mouth, the way the book had become a shield. He sat down, waited a breath, and asked what was sitting heavy. David confessed, the poor grade, the envy, the confusion of trying hard and still falling short. His father listened, the way a pond listens to stones, no splash, just ripples, and after a glass of water, guided David outside to the small garden, where shade cooled the soil and birds stitched patient threads through the afternoon. There, he offered 3 lessons, not as rules but as experiences. Tomorrow, he said, invite Matt to play soccer. We'll talk after. David nodded, a little nervous and a little relieved, as though someone had turned on a light he hadn't noticed was there. X20. The next day was the kind of bright that makes everything look freshly washed. After school, David and Matt met at the field. The game unfolded the way practice tends to reward. David's feet remembered what his mind didn't have to think about. He dribbled, passed, scored once, twice, 3 times, his body fluent in a language his pencil could not yet speak. Matt, eager but unfamiliar, lost the ball, misstepped, laughed at himself, and kept going. Everyone, even the boys who barely touched the ball, found some joy in the clatter of goals and the soft thud of passes. When they were done, the sun was lower and the field was full of footprints that would fade by evening. Back in the garden, David told his father everything, the 3 goals, the fun, Matt's fumbles. His father smiled, not at the goals but at the learning. See it clearly, he said. Matt struggles where you shine, and he shines where you struggle. People are different, this is not a problem to fix but a reality to honor. The words landed gently, like leaves. David felt a looseness in his chest. He realized his envy had been asking a bad question. Why am I not him? The better question was kinder. What is mine to practice? Here, the story pauses to breathe, the way a monk pauses before the next bell. In Buddhist teaching, there is a simple observation. All beings have seeds. Some sprout quickly, some sleep for a season that looks like forever. Envy waters nothing. Attention does. As David listened, the garden seemed to agree, each plant growing at its own pace towards the same Sunday. His father did not lecture about failure or talent. He invited David into a more spacious view. Comparison shrinks the world, curiosity opens it. That night, David lay in bed, feeling the field still in his legs. He did not feel smaller because Matt was good at math. He felt newly curious about what practice could do for him, the way a candle might wonder how much light is inside the wick. The first lesson was not about soccer at all. It was about vision, learning to see difference without judgment, to meet one's own path without apology. And behind that lesson, like a quiet drumbeat, was something softer, compassion. Compassion for Matt, still learning the rhythm of the ball. Compassion for himself, still learning the rhythm of numbers. In that tenderness, fear had less room to speak. Tomorrow, there would be a second challenge to watch, to notice, to count not just numbers but moments of attention. For now, the boy let his breath lengthen, the way coaches and monks both teach, and sleep came without argument. The following day, David carried his father's words like a secret folded in his pocket. At school, he remembered the challenge, to watch Matt, not with envy but with the quiet eyes of a listener. The hours stretched out like beads on a string, and David noticed things he had never paid attention to before. Matt, between classes, scribbled numbers in the margins of his notebook the way others drew dragons or football nets. At recess, while others traded snacks, Matt was counting coins with the seriousness of a shopkeeper. Even during a moment of play, he plucked a flower and began counting its petals, smiling to himself as though each number was a friend he recognized. David had once thought Matt was simply lucky. Now he saw that what looked like luck was really love. Matt enjoyed numbers the way David enjoyed chasing a ball across the field. That evening, in the quiet garden, David reported his findings to his father. He spoke of Matt's constant counting, his puzzles, his joy in small calculations. His father nodded slowly, as if affirming something ancient. That, he said gently, is the second lesson. We grow strong where we give our love. Practice is not punishment, it is devotion. Matt is good at math because he practices, and he practices because he loves it. You already know this truth in your body. Look at how soccer feels lighter, even when you sweat. Numbers can be the same, if you learn to meet them with affection. David felt the words stir something in him. Practice was not a wall but a garden, one that bloomed when watered daily. He remembered the Buddha's teaching about seeds. If you plant anger, you harvest thorns. If you plant kindness, you harvest peace. Perhaps math, too, could be a seed, not a punishment, but a possibility. What mattered was how he tended it. He realized he had been feeding envy, which never grows sweet fruit. But attention, like sunlight, could change everything. That night, as he prepared for bed, David closed his eyes and imagined numbers not as enemies but as players on a field. Addition ran fast, subtraction guarded the goal, multiplication passed swiftly, division sometimes stumbled, but always tried again. For the first time, math did not feel like a test. It felt like a game waiting to be played. He fell asleep with the image of numbers chasing one another under a wide sky. His heart a little lighter, his breath a little slower. The second lesson had revealed itself. Practice is born from love, and love makes practice gentle. And yet, David knew another challenge awaited him. His father's smile had hinted that the next step would be harder, a test not of observation but of effort. Somewhere ahead, the third lesson waited, patient as a stone underwater. The morning arrived with a stillness that felt like a held breath. David woke knowing the third lesson was near, though he did not yet know its shape. After school, his father asked him to sit in the garden once more. The late sun slanted through the leaves, painting the ground with shifting gold. Now, his father said, think honestly, how much better is Matt at math compared to you? David hesitated, his lips pressing together, before whispering, maybe 3 times better. His father nodded, not with judgment, but with calm certainty. Then tomorrow, he said, study 3 times harder. The words struck David like a bell, simple, but heavy. That night, when the house grew quiet, he opened his math book with unusual resolve. 1 hour passed in focused silence. Normally, he would have closed the book then, but the challenge pushed him on. A second hour followed, his pencil scratching, until his fingers ached. By the third hour, the numbers blurred into fog, his head throbbed, and at last, without meaning to, he collapsed onto the table, asleep among fractions and formulas. A gentle tap on his shoulder woke him. His father stood there, his eyes soft with understanding. David's apology came quickly, spilling out like water. I tried, Dad, I really did, but my head hurt, and I fell asleep. His father smiled and stroked his hair, not disappointed, only tender. David, this is the truth of the third lesson. When we force ourselves into something we do not love, discipline becomes heavy, and consistency feels like chains. But when the heart delights in a practice, effort becomes light, and time itself forgets to be a burden. Think of how you play soccer. You lose hours without noticing, because love carries you. David listened, feeling the ache in his head soften into clarity. It was not about being 3 times better or studying 3 times harder. It was about discovering the joy that could make effort natural. His father's words echoed something he had once heard a monk say in the temple on the edge of town. To walk the path, either find love in what you do, or learn to love the step you are on. Suddenly, the lesson no longer felt like a command, it felt like a doorway. That night, before sleep, David whispered a quiet vow. He would try to look at math not as a punishment, but as another field, another game, another chance to practice presence. And even if he never loved it the way Matt did, he would bring patience to each step, the way a gardener waters even the smallest seed. For in the end, success was not about comparing strengths, but about walking one's path with sincerity. The 3 lessons now stood clear before him. Respect difference, practice with love, and either find joy or learn to cultivate it. They were not just about soccer, or math, or even school, they were about life itself. And as sleep settled, David realized that the envy which once shadowed him had softened into something new. Compassion for Matt, for himself, for the quiet garden that held their evenings. Years passed, but the garden's lessons never left David. Even when the numbers grew harder in middle school, even when high school demanded more than he thought he had to give, he remembered that comparison was a narrow road, while curiosity was wide. He still played soccer with joy, not to prove himself, but to feel alive. And sometimes, when the pages of math books looked impossible, he breathed the way his father had taught him, slow, steady, like leaves swaying in wind. In those breaths, discipline became lighter. There were evenings when he failed, when frustration pressed against his chest, but instead of drowning in it, he recalled the second lesson. Practice is love disguised as effort. He began small, counting steps, watching patterns in clouds, measuring the time it took his tea to cool. Numbers became companions rather than enemies. Slowly, without drama, improvement came. As a young man, David would look back and realize that the third lesson was not about math at all. It was about the way of life, to either embrace what the heart already loves, or to water patience until love begins to sprout. Just as a monk does not sit in meditation because it is easy, but because peace is born in stillness, David learned that growth often asks for gentleness more than force. One evening, much later, he found himself in the same garden, older now, the air still carrying the scent of cut grass. His father, hair thinner and slower in movement, sat beside him. They did not speak much. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of everything already said. A lantern flickered, and David felt gratitude rise like a tide for soccer, for math, for envy that had become compassion, for lessons that were both simple and eternal. And though the story might sound like it ended here, in truth, it opened outward. Because every listener, every reader, carries their own mat and their own soccer field. Each of us faces something that feels like a struggle beside someone else's gift. The teaching is the same. Respect the difference. Practice what you love, and if you must, learn to love what you practice. In that way, the envy softens, the burden lightens, and the path feels like home. Somewhere, the Buddha's words return like a gentle echo. Your work is to discover your work, and then, with all your heart, to give yourself to it.